Welcome to the June 25th OpenZFS production user call. We have Gibran, Stu, Jan, and myself, Michael, so far. And it sounds like, Gibran, you have an update on your ZFS-based VM on ZFS. What did you learn?
Yeah, so it was really a simple issue. The ZFS block size on the data sets that my VMs were hosted in didn't match up with the block size that I was creating the data sets within the VM. And so there seemed to be a block misalignment. And so as the data set grew bigger, the blocks weren't being assigned to the correct blocks. So the blocks in the VM were not being assigned to the correct blocks outside the VM. And so what I then did was I set the default block size to the host machine all at 128K so that I could use the smaller block size of 16K inside the VMs. And then it all worked fine.
If you do that, you end up with write amplification. But if you have parity, so rate Z or D rate, you really don't want to have 8K record size for your Z vaults. No.
Yeah, it
The
was 16K records for the data set.
doesn't work well.
Yeah.
What you can do is if you're using ZFS inside of ZFS, uh, you just pick a record. So ZFS does not have a fixed block size. So unlike something like FAT32, NTFS or whatever, or UFS, there is no obviously correct optimal way to just have your ZVaults record size match the file system block size. As in, like for UFS, you would set it to 32K these days by default, and then align your partitions to a multiple of that, normally a multiple of 1 MB, even because rounding errors, who cares about those? Um, and then it works. But with ZFS, inside of ZFS, you will end up with different size blocks. And that's kind of fine. You will have
So,
some write amplification, but for that you get the opportunity to compress.
so Gibran, that's a 8K ZVol, which I believe is the default.
Yeah.
That sounds pretty small, and there was a rather noisy discussion with Jim Salter and the Proxmox folks about how their use of the default was like the worst thing ever, such that 16 or 32K on the ZVol itself might be what you want, and then it remains to be seen on the VM.
The real big problem is if you have a RAID Z and you
Yeah.
ask for 8K, what this means is if you have a 4K device, you can have 4 data blocks and then you have to have parity blocks. Worst case, let's say you have a RAID Z3 over multiple devices, and the smallest allocations you can have is this. And if you really would force that, you would end up with 2 data and 3 parity blocks for every write in ZFS. So you would have 4K data to make 8K, and then 3 times 4K parity. And yeah, that's not
Well,
fun
Jan, inside the VM or on the host?
on the host if you have
Oh,
RAID
goodness.
Z3 or
Okay.
something. You wouldn't do RAID Z normally inside the
Right,
guest
exactly.
Yeah, yeah.
because unless you're passing through full HBA or something, then it makes total sense to have
Hmm.
RAID Z or even D RAID
Yeah.
on a yeah. So you
Hmm.
need bigger. So the smallest allocation side is 2 to the power of a shift, which is yeah gives you 4K these days for modern disks because their logical block size of the physical block size, which you should match with your logical block size, is 4K. For technically for SSDs, it's even higher, but they are written in such a way at the firmware level that it works out well enough if you use 4K native. So if you really have 8K and a white stripe, you can't have a white stripe. And yeah, that's annoying. I guess the other thing you should ask people is, given what you're using a hypervisor for, do you really need the pool to be a parity rate, or can you make a mirrored pool for your VM backing storage? Because
Interesting.
mirrors will just not mind the small block size that much. Sure, it's a lot of objects to track, so your metadata size to uh, cache size is bad when it comes to the arc, because the arc entry is the same size, whether it's tracking 512 byte on a legacy pool or 16 megabytes. Probably don't use the full 16 megabytes. Don't go above 8, because there are some ugly corner cases if you actually use 16. See?
Really?
Yeah, like some of the it triggers. It is handled correctly, but it can cause slowdowns.
Hmm. So I'd never
And
considered on disk record size versus arc size. Have you
oh,
seen any differences
yeah,
there?
every allocated block has to be tracked by ZFS.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah.
If you have bigger blocks, there are fewer objects to track.
Hmm.
Especially when you have an L2 arc, that can become relevant.
Mm-hmm.
Or dedupe, even more important, because every block dedupe is stored in the dedupe table. And it makes a big difference if your block is tracking 500 byte or a megabyte through a dedupe table entry.
Mm-hmm.
It's like factor 2000 there.
Cool.
Mm,
Well, Gibran, does that leave you more science to try at your end? And of
Yes,
course,
yes.
creating a new VVol is pretty
and
quick, free of charge.
Yeah.
since
Yeah,
if
no,
you're using
I will
ZFS on
play with that.
ZFS, you're going to have some form of yeah, write amplification from the mismatch anyway. Maybe give it a try and bump the record size so that compression can do more for you, both inside both pools.
Okay.
So I wouldn't go too crazy, so maybe try a megabyte or something as your record size
Okay.
on both
Cool.
ends, and then you have bigger blocks, so you have a significantly better chance that even the fast compression algorithms like LZ4 compress down by a full power of 2, and then you actually get savings,
Hmm.
because there is no saving from compressing something within the same block, because blocks are located in powers of 2. So you cannot have a 10% compressed block.
Oh, actually, to that point, would there ever be a case when you want to disable compression on the VM like you do with, say, pre-compressed photographic or video data, or
Mm,
no native operating system still
well,
is
that's an
kind of
interesting question, whether
blunt
you
and
want
similar?
the compression inside
Hmm.
the guest of the host. I guess given that there's a cost going from the guest through the power virtualized disk driver to the host, I would be tempted to put the compression in the guest,
Oh, interesting.
Not
because
in
it
a
means
host.
that, yeah, not on the host if it's ZFS. Um, but if you have it on the host, yeah, how would you do that?
Yeah, no kidding. But oh,
I mean,
heck,
if
heck,
you're,
heck.
I would compress as close to the source as possible, just by intuition. I haven't benchmarked that. Run the experiment if you want.
Yeah, exactly. And there's always something to
Okay.
be learned about ZFS. Always, for the rest of your life. Deal with it.
Yeah, no, I'm gonna test that and see
Cool.
where the compression works best.
That would be great, because I seriously I hadn't considered that until you brought it up. Anything else on that, or do you feel better and you've got plenty to work with?
I've got plenty to work with.
Awesome. Any other thoughts on that topic? It's a
And
doozy.
have you already read up on the primary cache equals metadata property setting?
think we covered
Uh,
that last week. That was kind of the
yeah,
point.
I
Okay,
do have a bunch of articles open actually on my
yeah,
computer right now.
because that kind of double caching can really waste lots of resources and make the guest and the host fight over DRAM.
Okay.
If you're using a ZFS host as a dedicated hypervisor with big virtual machines, you probably also want to manually cap the maximum arc cache size so that the arc cache never grows big enough to become a problem instead of downsizing when it becomes a problem. Because when the arc cache has to be shrunk, you have to find clean cache pages which aren't too important for system performance, or
Yep.
even worse, have to write back buffer dirty pages. And while the arc is shrinking, the system is fairly unresponsive because any read can cause a write, and that then pauses until the system has downsized the arc. So especially when you're starting big virtual machines, it can feel like your system has frozen for tens of seconds.
Yep. Seen it,
Um,
but it worked.
it will recover, but it's really annoying to deal with. And if you know that your guest operating systems are smarter than DOS and have a buffer cache worth using, then you can just set the zvol or one of the ancestor data sets that doesn't contain anything important. Uh, Primary cache property to metadata, then the host will only cache the metadata which necessary for ZFS self-organization,
Mhm.
and the guest will do its own caching. And yeah, that way you don't
So
have double
here's the
buffering, and the host will be happy with a fairly small arc cache size limit.
and 2 points. Absolutely worst case, if you disable all, data caching, you're still doing better than most file systems on the planet. So there's that.
Yeah.
Another thing is I had a desktop go wild and I inadvertently filled nearly all of my 128 gigs of RAM. So I dropped down the ARC by 100 gigs and it sat there and took its time, but it worked. It worked completely. So that was delightful. But here's a question for you, Jan. When you shrink the arc, do you think it follows any of its prioritization and, least frequently used logic, or does it just randomly
It does.
blast the top from the bottom? It
I think
does follow.
it's if the arc is effectively two size limited queues, and it drops from the end of the queue.
Oh, nice. Okay.
Um,
Drop.
it approximates one queue sorted by most frequently used, one by most recently used, and then the size of the two queues according to the hit rate. So if one performs better than the other for its capacity, then it gets priority to grow over the other. So
Cool.
if you have a server where you have just the working set where sorry,
Yeah, can you force tune that?
a working set where everything fits into main memory, the most frequently used will just take over because yeah, you can keep everything there. It provides a perfect hit rate.
There was a
And
question.
if you
Can you?
have a streaming workload, the most
Yeah.
recently is fairly useless, even because yeah. But if you have, I don't know, a build server, most recently used is fairly important. But most frequently used is also important so that you keep the system and the latest object files and so on in cache.
Hmm.
And that's why the arc is such a nice algorithm,
Yep.
better than just LRU or uh, double clock or whatever. You
Cool.
don't want to deal with, yeah.
Stu, is that your question on is that like tunable or?
Yeah, I mean, is it something that we can I want my most recently used one to be 70% of my cache because I'm gonna
No, the arc auto sizes that for you depending on which half of your cache performs better.
Hmm.
is
That's
there a
kind
way
of the magic in the arc algorithm. You have to
is,
read the white paper on the adaptive replacement cache algorithm for the details.
yeah,
There are
if there was a way to fake it, to be able to pre-cache, half a terabyte of video files that I'm about to edit.
oh yeah, I like tar to death null 3 times.
Yeah, dude, yeah. It might take a blunt instrument solution like that to just sort of, hey, I trust me, I want this.
Yeah.
Tell it, literally tell it. That's
I
cool.
guess I don't know the POSIX F advice will use or something like that, or sequential and so on are actually honored in ZFS, or if it's a strong hint, if it's a weak hint, if it's just ignored, and the prefetcher assumes that it is smart enough to detect access patterns to kind of ignore these kind of explicit prefetch hints via M-advice and POSIX F-advice and so on.
Hmm.
Oh, wait.
I don't
So
know
basically,
how that's hooked into ZFS. Never had to figure that out.
yeah. So we need a stew hint. Don't ignore this. Do it the way I wanted it.
Look into how the operating system you're using ZFS on, whether it's FreeBSD or Linux or illumos, handles the F-advice system call.
F advise, you said?
Yeah, let me.
Go ahead and scroll down on the doc for all this. I'm putting in notes as best I can.
Yeah, give me a second.
I threw it in there, but I don't know if I have it spelled right. Cool.
Yeah, it's F advised, no underscore.
Okay, cool.
F,
Thank you.
F advised 64 is on Linux. And there's a POSIX. Oh, that's just pre-declared. Thanks, John.
Cool.
That'll put me down in a rabbit hole.
This is
Yeah,
all
the
rabbit hole, and I
question
love
is,
it.
what does your kernel and file system combination do with those hints? And then for memory map stuff, there's M-advice in a POSIX and a non-POSIX manner. And it also has a M-advice will need. And then you have confusing things like this. And
Maybe drop that in the chat or in the document, just hey, for more wisdom on the first system call, like here, I don't know, something like that. Anyway, cool. Okay, well, how about we all go down our different rabbit holes on that, and can I do a little lightning round for the summit?
sure.
So, like the document says, if you scroll down, picking up where we left off, Jan, it sounds like Rob kindly added cloning support to channel programs. Are there any other wish list items there?
Yes.
Yes. Go ahead and rip through your wish list.
My wish list is creating new data sets. So I can kind of fake that by cloning an empty snapshot.
Oh, that was your workaround. Okay.
Yeah, but creating new data sets would be important,
Okay.
especially creating them with properties. Because the funny thing is the only kind of properties you can set are user properties via the zfs.sync.setProp function. Because some properties are dangerous and cannot be changed. I don't know, an extreme example would be to change the Unicode normalization on an existing data set. You can't do that even from the ZFS command line or even set Unicode equals true or something like that on. Sorry. Because that requires you to kind of, in the case, if you change the normalization to convert, and if you enable Unicode, suddenly what do you do with files with non-Unicode byte
Oh, I see. Yep.
sequences? Do you just, I don't know, put them
Just
in
throw
the
everything on a
reserved
zvault.
category or something? Like there is a system reserved range you could map them into? Or what do you do? The realistic answer is you can't provide correct
Okay.
semantics for certain property changes.
Yep.
And others are just not possible to safely perform within the context of the channel program. But especially when creating and cloning, it would be nice to be able to change the properties
Okay.
so that
Other
we
one?
could set stuff like set read only.
Oh, so there's currently no property change support?
Only for user properties.
Oh, okay.
You can read all properties other than the mounted and the mounted property because there's no good way to hook that up in different operating systems. So yeah,
What's
the
missing if it only does user properties? What would you want? Oh, so like tool
normal
level?
properties, non-user properties like
Okay.
read only would be the
Well,
obvious one for me.
aren't they read only
Record size,
Oh, okay. Got it.
this kind of stuff.
Got it.
Yeah. And it's fine if there are restrictions that certain properties are documented as you can change this property, but having a whitelist of properties I can change would be nice because if its whitelist includes the necessary properties, I could rewrite like all of the current stuff where I generate a channel program, feed it input, run the channel program as a read-only channel program so
Okay.
that it's not an async transaction, and then have it return the changes. I could actually perform the changes. So the first program would only check if there's anything that has to run, yeah, then run the channel program in the sync transaction again, and then it does everything.
Nice. Okay.
And that would
Noted.
really help make the code simpler, make it faster, yeah, less error
Okay. Moving
prone.
on. Scroll down and moving on. Any others on your wish list, or is that a tangible starting point?
So changing properties and creating new file systems are the two things which are still missing. And
Beautiful.
for the create stuff, I may be able to work around that. Yeah.
Okay. So thinking about the sort of privacy, for lack of a better term, I wonder if there could be a little switch that simply says unprivileged users perhaps have like almost no ZFS or zpool commands because, hey, they're administrative. And the whole notion that an unprivileged user can see all the data sets, which may include like human resources and stew and violations or something like that. Just where if someone goes wild on data sets and pedantic whatever details, that is just a bunch of information that really shouldn't leak out of, say, an HR department or
Um,
security department, or listing all the different products you use in your environment, just whatever you could be revealing through data set names. Go. Thoughts?
um, I think that this is kind of a useless idea because as long as it's
Okay.
mounted, you can see it in the mount table.
That's true. Yep.
Just run on FreeBSD
Yep.
mount-v
Yep.
and you get all the mounting information of all file systems,
Yep.
including the snapshots which have been accessed.
Yep.
So yeah, at that point, sure, you can now could use the Mac framework to maybe tag that information and hide it. And
Hmm.
then you could extend where the user permissions we already have, where you can delegate operations to users so that being able to list and get stuff would become also something you have to explicitly delegate, and maybe it's delegated by default, but you
Hmm.
can revoke the delegation.
Mm-hmm.
Then I guess that would make sense for stuff like reading user properties or something like that.
Oh, yep. Yep.
But I would just
Same.
consider them root writable, world readable files.
Mm-hmm.
Are you
Actually,
going
what if it,
to are you going to hide etc hosts and resolve conf next?
interesting. So my
Or your
snarky, so just use
NSF
UIDs for
config
everything
file
so then it's
or
readable.
PAM configurations?
It's
Kind of,
another long slippery slope.
it's important that unprivileged users aren't allowed to modify anything, but do you really need information hiding here or just write control?
Well, the existence of something, I mean, being able to obfuscate, Stu's HR performance evals
Mm.
or
But
Stu's performance failures, that'd be a different
yeah,
different
exactly.
conversation.
Just how realistic is it that the HR department has a data set named to be fired and then full names under each candidate or whatever
Yeah.
as a data set? This is a
Well,
really
I can.
contrived example.
Oh, it is, but it's also something I have witnessed on a Windows file server
I guess more
manage a
realistic
HR department.
problems would be something like movie company with internal working titles
Exactly.
or product
Clients,
names or
Sony
something like that.
Pictures,
Uh,
clients, Universal,
Yeah.
hmm?
Well,
client names alone.
well, then it
Oh yeah,
ties to multi-tenancy as well.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want Coke and Pepsi looking at, knowing that, hey, my new product line is set to release in August.
maybe
Bingo.
don't give them that level of access to your ZFS.
No, I know, but again, to do the examples of why this is important, we have to go
Yeah, just
steps further.
think of a VFX shop where you have, I don't know, Disney and Warner Brothers as a customer, or DC and Marvel or
Yep,
whatever.
that's or Pepsi, Coke, whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure those are kind of realistic, but yeah, guess you have
Yeah.
to come up
So,
with internal code names or just continuous numbers, random numbers, whatever.
like I said, UIDs, which
UUIDs.
remember this one means Coca-Cola. Like, yeah, no.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
well, think about that while you're taking a shower, and just maybe you'll have some epiphany and report back.
But as long as it's mounted and you haven't written your own custom mandatory access control kernel module, I can just run mount-v to see it.
Mm-hmm. No, and very good point. So it's a multi-pronged problem.
I guess if you delegate that to different jails,
Ah, okay. Ah,
you have your
oh,
jail
I'll throw it in
Coke, you
there.
have your jail
Yeah,
Pepsi.
which are jail 1, 2, 3, and that's kind of left to the
Yeah.
John.
A jail doesn't see the other jails on the system, so you could
Right?
even
No.
name them that.
Oh, good point. Yeah, no. We need clever ideas.
Workarounds
Powering
at best.
forward. Yeah. So, for what it's worth, people were rather positive about the notion of illumos catching up with OpenZFS. So I do know who to talk to. Various people have said, "Hey, we'll throw a few farthings in there." I don't know if Andrew's on the call, but for what it's worth, that's a topic that may get some love and attention. And gee, porting ZFS from the ZFS platform might not be that difficult. Most of the shims are like Solaris compatibility modules, so hopefully it's pretty straightforward. The one wild question is like try to please everyone and have like a switch that you either use their ZFS or OpenZFS, but I'll leave that to the experts. Jan, you probably know best. Does FreeBSD need a user lib something something libzfs that's brought in with the OpenZFS import each time? Is that what would solve your
The
needs?
libraries
What
are
is the
there.
current? They are there. They're
The
in user
libraries are there.
source or
The
they're in user
headers,
lib?
required to build against the libraries are not all installed. You're missing like 4 or 6 headers you have to include so that you can actually build against. I think 2 to build against libzfs core and then other 4 to build against libzfs proper. And yeah, Rob may know more on how to untangle that, but I can tell you that if you're prepared to copy them into a contrib directory, thanks to the way the CDDL is written, it will not infect your code base, unlike the GPL or AGPL or stuff like that. Instead, as long as you don't modify the files, you can just ship them as part of a commercial application or build a commercial application and then ship it as closed source binary. It's legal.
Okay.
And even
It's
if
a
you
bit
do modify,
ugly. Sorry?
and even if you do modify them, you just need to ship
There it is.
only your modified version.
Exactly.
Right.
If you do modify, you only have to share the modified CDDL licensed files. So if you have to make a trivial fix like, oh, I don't want to copy more files. I just want to define add 2 type defs here or whatever. And then you make that hacked up file available that would be totally compliant with the license.
Or if you wanted to do something like you needed an interface to do something.
Yeah.
So you hack up the interface and then you've got your own file separate that uses the interface. That's perfectly fine. You just have to release the interface, not your own stuff.
Yeah, not the code calling into it. But to use libzfs core and libzfs copying files unmodified and putting them first in the header include order is fine.
Okay. Andrew, did you catch that bit about illumos 2 seconds ago?
Probably not.
Okay, I had a quick Fediverse ping saying, hey, who would love to throw a few $ currency at this effort, and some prominent illumos folks step forward. So the interest is out there. And so I will work with folks like you, yourself, your boss, and the named developers who might be appropriate for this, and look at what it would actually take, because it might not actually take that much to go full circle from illumos to illumos, technically. Anyway, Jan, anything else on headers and library bits? Thanks for clarifying on the headers.
No.
Cool. Moving on, related to that, in FreeBSD land, it sounds like Samba needs a volume shadow copy service contraption that would actually point at the vaguely stable libzfs to properly support it in any given release, right?
Yeah, TrueNAS had that in their code base.
Correct.
And I think they could build it because they always had the system sources, and it got kind of pulled out of the base system
They cherry-picked.
sources where the headers are present but not installed. So basically they had an include path pointing somewhere into user source sys contrib OpenZFS whatever.
Okay. So we could, in theory, do the same if we coordinate the Samba VSS module maintainer and perhaps the port maintainer and ZFS folks, or what would be needed?
No, because if I remember correctly, our build cluster is set up without the system sources and available. So the port would fail to build because there are no base system sources, if I remember correctly. I could be wrong about that.
But if the headers are, what needs to drop in user local?
So take that code base, the VFS shadow copies thingy, and instead of the ugliness of pulling it out of the system sources somewhere, because the header is not actually installed into user include. Instead, you just copy those 6 headers you really need from the system sources into that port, and then
what if, say, for 15 we target we target having user local contrib something headers so that you don't have to ever turn to sources and they're just kept up to date.
Yeah, the proper thing to do would be to just install them somewhere where they don't hurt into user include.
Yeah, so scroll up to okay, user contrib, so user include. I'm
Where the
guessing on the
other
path
headers
here, but
are. It's just that they aren't installed because the way FreeBSD
yep,
builds OpenZFS and installs it, those headers just aren't installed. Someone familiar with the build system can probably solve this in 10 minutes.
exactly. So I put PR exclamation point
Oh,
exclamation
the
point
PR
exclamation.
exists,
Oh, it does. Okay.
and it
Link
has
it if
for
you're
2 years
feeling.
or so, or 3.
Oh, whoops. Okay, has
Uh,
existed.
it's about not being able to build this
Oh,
exact Samba VSS module
okay.
as a
Yep.
port, and yeah.
Well, let's see the PR to add it rather than complain about it, because it sounds like if it's
It
a
is not a
10-minute
complaint.
project.
It's why
Yep.
can't I do that? And then, oh, we figured it out, and now someone would have to do something about this. And I think
Okay.
I came across the thread and actually documented how I managed to build my own stuff against libzfs
Yep.
without having the headers properly installed and instead just importing them as a contrib subdirectory in my code base.
Okay.
And that, yeah.
And in your personal opinion, should BECTL then point to user include contrib lib
What
the
kind of thing?
BECTL, which we
Mm,
identify as one of the few in-base consumers? Should it point at sources or point at our
it doesn't
newfound
matter because
hypothetical
it's part
contrib?
of the base system.
Right. Well,
The
okay, but
moment you have the BECTL sources, okay, in theory, you could have the base system, but not the kernel sources. But that's with base packages, you can actually create that again, but
yep.
it's such a stupid configuration that I don't think more than 5 people on the planet have intentionally done that in the
Okay,
last decade.
got it.
So
Moving
yeah,
on.
but once you have done it, you can clean up the BECTL makefile because then it doesn't have
Okay.
to do the yeah, the strange workarounds it does.
Okay, that's good to know. Okay, thank you, tangible.
The other thing which BECTL should do is add to the zpool history.
Oh yes.
And at the very least, which would be trivial, record the BECTL command to the pool so that you see BECTL create, BECTL whatever. That would already be at least part of your zpool history so that BECTL operations are invisible in the normal history
Yeah.
view.
Surprise.
But what I would prefer would be if it could instead log the equivalent ZFS command invocations. So every time it does something via libzfs, it builds a command line which would do the equivalent stuff and appends that command line to the pool history.
Interesting.
Which is exact and kind of why I assume this got overlooked is that the ZFS and zpool commands have some logic fairly up basically in main to figure out if this command invocation is something which belongs into the history, and then it just takes the whole argument vector and joins it with spaces and writes it to the log.
Yep.
So there is no log this command in every individual command. Instead, there's a centralized place which triggers out that this is basically a write command which belongs into the history, unlike a get or list command.
Yep.
And
Yep.
if so, if it's basically just a modifying command, then it gets logged to the history by logging the command line invocation, which makes sense for ZFS and zpool as a command. But for higher level tools like BECTL, yeah, you kind of want to see it spelled out in ZFS command invocations if you're looking at the history. At least that's what I would like to see.
Yeah, which raises a question of configurable logging, which is like, hey, I don't need to see that I created and destroyed a snapshot every 15 minutes, keep that forever, whereas I'm losing commands written by the ECTL. So
The
I
fix for
suspect
that
there's room for
is to
improvement there,
actually
yeah?
consume the logs with whatever mechanism is appropriate on your operating system. Like, for example, every time you do something which shows up in the log on FreeBSD, you get a defd event.
Yeah. Yeah, but don't you want that history to travel with your pool to 3 different operating systems?
Then write it to the pool.
Okay. Oh, yeah, I guess. So use your
Plaintext
logging
files
mechanism and
work on
drop the
every
log.
Unix-like
Yes, they
system.
do. They work very
Just
well.
write your syslog to that pool.
I'm not disagreeing.
Yeah.
Okay, so that to the pool. So I need to run, but one last one. Is there anyone present who cares about NFS auditing on FreeBSD, which has its own NFSD? Because I know there's code out there and there's a company that's happy to look at it, but that's like totally coin operated. And if no one cares, well, by definition, no one here cares.
I
Who
don't
cares?
care,
Okay.
but I
It does
know
come out of
that
the
it has
conversation
come
on
up
like
repeatedly that people
auditing.
want auditing in ZFS, but ZFS is too far down the stack to
Exactly.
provide enough context for good kind of audit records. Those are
Nicely
at
put.
the VFS or system call level, or the equivalent to the VFS would be the NFS level. So you
Mm-hmm.
actually know who requested this operation. Because by the time it is a ZFS read or write, you don't know which user space process initiated that, or
Yep.
even if one did.
Good point. Yep.
I mean, if you're far enough down in ZFS, a write could be triggered by a read silver.
Yeah.
Who do you attribute that to in auditing? Doesn't really, and
No,
does it even
that's a
make
very good
sense
point.
to put that into an audit because it was an internal operation?
Yep. Well, yeah, and the challenge is at least ZFS is giving us the consistency, but we have a wide variety of NFSDs on each OS, and yeah, your mileage will vary, and heaven forbid they all log extremely differently. So I guess that's not a problem for purely ZFS. Other topics, anything you want me for, or shall I hop on a bike and you continue in my absence? Welcome, Alexander and Andrew.
Hello.
Hello.
Hello, hello. Other topics?
No.
Did you guys see somebody had sent a patch to FreeBSD for ZFS, one of them? Let me see if I can find it. For the doc.
Oh,
You have a link?
oh, really?
Yeah, I'm looking for it now.
The handbook chapter?
No, for the man page. And I told him, yeah, you got to send this upstream.
Oh, interesting. Well, yeah, generally, unless it's extremely FreeBSD specific, and then I don't even want to know what it looks like to keep track of what's
Make a pull
local.
request against the OpenZFS GitHub repository.
Hmm.
Yeah, I sent him that link.
Okay.
Let me see if it's maybe in my profile, as in like the things you commented on
Hmm.
recently.
Hmm.
Aha, I found it. I think I found it. Let me just make sure. Yeah, this is the one. All right, I'm posting it in the chat now.
Go ahead and link that to the doc.
Okay.
And I guess I'm out of here shortly. So anything else for me?
Nope. Have a good bike ride.
Thank you so much. Take care,
Have
everyone.
fun.
I am simply stepping away. You can continue for however many hours you please. See ya.
See
My
ya.
wife's blowing kisses. Bye. Leave button. Leave button. It keeps hiding.
Hmm. I have to find the doc now. I do not know how to edit this thing. Oh, there's the button. Oh, nice. I see. You're already doing it. Is that Jan doing it? Do you guys hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay.
I just
Oh, I muted
don't have
myself.
anything intelligent to say.
Sorry, I muted myself.
No
All I
problem.
had
I
to
almost
say is
never have
that
anything.
this old patch from 2011 changes the usage message from the for the ZFS zpool command to document the -x. It doesn't patch it, so apparently there was an undocumented argument to zpool import where there's an uppercase X flag implemented but not documented already because yeah, everything else just changes to the main page. Let's have a look if this is overcome by events. So yeah, the current main page documents a an uppercase X flag. So I think this is overcome by events because the main page for zpool import in FreeBSD 14.3, which includes OpenZFS 2.2, includes the following text I put in the chat. So yeah, because I was a bit wary of looking at this review because while the review isn't too old, the PR number is so low that it had to be a decade old, and it is. So someone tried to revive a long dead PR. Probably just because they were confused. And if we look at the zpool man page, let me move that tab over to the screen, to the window you can see. Here the -x is documented.
It seemed like the
So
patch adds a -V.
here that adds the -x.
Oh, and the
Here
V
-v.
and
But
the
it only
T.
adds it to the main page, the review at least. If you look at the review, it only touches the main zpool import 8. It doesn't actually touch the zpool import command. So if we look at the main page, right, there is no uppercase Z. But I don't know if it actually exists in OpenZFS anymore. That would have to be checked first. By the way, why is it set up? Why is it a single space here and presumably a tab there? Oh, just because the way the text is flowing. Yeah. Oh. Let me check something in a shell for a moment.
Okay, that's enough fresh air.
Interesting. Anyone still listening? So
I can hear you.
when running zpool import -uppercase Z, it does not fail with it does not fail with an unsupported option or whatever. So it's not an invalid option to give zpool import and -uppercase is V option. So if I try something like this, I will put it in chat. We can obviously see that zpool import doesn't have an uppercase Z option, but if I run it with an uppercase Z, it accepts that. So get opt is invoked in such a way that it takes the -Z option, but it's not documented, and also not documented in the user's message, as you can see in this message.
Could this be a case of it was removed, but for compatibility reasons, it is ignored rather than?
Possible, but this deserves further research, not just a change to the main page, however well intentioned, from 2011 against a totally different branch of the ZFS development.
Oh, this predates OpenZFS, of course, because
Yes,
it's
this is
what
when
for some reason
ZFS
that
in
didn't occur to me.
FreeBSD was a downstream of the illumos repository, and we had a non-trivial
I
local
remember.
change set. And
Yeah,
back then,
my
FreeBSD would have been a proper upstream for getting this in, and then from there getting it upstreamed again.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah, that's why I mentioned that the PR number is far too low. That's over. That's what
Yeah,
tripped me up when looking at that does not match. We can't have a review from this year for this PR number because it does not compute. There's at least a decade, no, more like 1.5 decades between them.
Yeah, I didn't. I've got like so much stuff going on. It didn't occur to me. And I just, the guy assigned the review to me, and I like received hundreds of emails
Yep.
today, and I'm just trying to like not let people slip through the cracks and then talk about how
Yeah.
bad the FreeBSD maintainers are. And I was just
Yeah,
like,
but please
this
know,
needs to go off the stream.
sadly, we missed this when it was appropriate. It has now been overcome by events. We uh, abandoned our fork of ZFS and went with OpenZFS. The ZFS community has reunified under a common banner or whatever, if you want to fluff it up.
Oh, I love fluffing it up. You know me. Yeah,
Uh,
that's what I've got to do. Unfortunately, I broke my graphics drivers. Um,
Well,
and
that's
so
unfortunate.
yeah,
Doesn't
and then
matter,
we
you only want white man pages anyway.
oh yeah, exactly. I don't care, but then when I have to interact with Bugzilla, when my
Um,
Bugzilla accounts got merged, somehow the password is like I don't have it. I
um,
tried all the passwords in my keyring and I don't have any of them. So like only my desktop works. And then like I tried to reply to the
Alexander,
bug and close the bug. Yep.
when you said you broke your graphics driver, did you upgrade from 14.2 to 14.3, or are you on stable or current?
I'm on current and I've been having some trouble with it. Basically, anytime there's an ABI breakage, it never just works anymore. I use
Of course
ports
not.
modules to build it, so it
Uh,
should
what
just work.
what I found quite helpful is to consume current via package base, especially
Yeah,
because the source package is the source package for exactly the sources you have installed.
the trouble with package base for my use case is that I have to build other committers send me patches like almost every day.
Do it in a jail
Oh, well, duh, that makes sense.
so that you don't mess up your user land unless you really have to run it unjailed. And even then, I would try to run it in a jail or change root environment with very permissive configuration.
Gentlemen, I'm going to leave you to it.
Yep.
I'm not useful here, and I am totally
Enjoy your
slammed
day.
today. Yeah, I'm not.
Anyway, at
Bye.
least don't waste more of it with us. Are you still there?
Kernel install world, and
Let's
it
just stop
used
the
to just
recorded
work.
part here, and then we can go over your. I have quite an experience unfucking FreeBSD. So like and subscribe, everyone.
Yeah, yeah.